Hello, I'm Fraser Thompson, Director of AlphaBeta, an economic strategy firm with headquarters in Singapore. Coronavirus disease, or COVID-19 as it's more commonly known as, has created devastating health and economic impacts. Social distancing measures and border closures have decimated economic activity in key consumer-driven sectors, such as tourism and retail trade, while manufacturing output has been badly affected by disruptions in supply chains. Governments have also had to grapple with how they deliver essential services and welfare to their citizens, and are now working to implement the world's largest vaccination effort. Much of the focus to date has been spent dealing with the immediate health and economic implications of the pandemic. But the key question now is what comes next? Can we take this opportunity to radically rethink our economic systems and truly build back better? To answer that question, I've asked some of my AlphaBeta colleagues to share their perspectives.
Governments have introduced expansionary fiscal policies as well as easy monetary policies to manage the crisis. As the policy discussions move towards the recovery phase in the next 1 to 3 years, it is important to take a sector approach to develop targeted recommendations for this medium-term growth phase. Our work suggests 3 crucial aspects to policy development. First, understand what has changed and what hasn't. Some of the growth drivers across these economic sectors have changed fundamentally over the next 12 months. Take tourism, for example, which has been decimated in most economies. Fortunately, there are significant opportunities from domestic tourism to regional travel bubbles over the next 12 months, which could be crucial to help the industry get back on its feet. Second, rebuilding together. If you look at the SARS pandemic, the most effective responses involve the forming of sector-specific multi-stakeholder task force to guide policies. These typically include representatives from government, the private sector, academia, and civil society. Countries will need to consider setting up similar types of committees. Third, look ahead. Beyond the pandemic, there are a number of major shifts that are affecting sector competitiveness, one of which is the adoption of Industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 could transform productivity in many sectors, but the adoption and awareness is low across most sectors in Asia. Our work with the Asian Development Bank showed that Industry 4.0 will require a complete transformation in reskilling in many sectors, and today, there is a large and growing gap between the needs of industry and the outputs from training and education centers.
Internet usage has increased globally, yet the increase in digital connectivity has not led to the expected improvements in productivity and economic growth. Our perspective at AlphaBeta is not that the belief in the transformative power of technologies is misplaced. It is just that not much of it is being measured today. If you like, we're just skimming the surface of its potential benefits. Our recent work with Google showed that digital technologies could create an annual economic impact of up to $3.4 trillion by 2030 in 16 economies. Our work identified 12 policy levers that are crucial to capturing the opportunity, but I just want to highlight one, and that is rethinking digital skills. We find that, for example, digitally skilled workers in Indonesia today contribute about $60 billion to the country's GDP annually. But if digital skilling efforts were to be maximized, this value could grow over 5 times to reach about $300 billion in 2030. How can we make this happen? One opportunity is to provide skilling credits to individuals that incentivize them to take up new digital skilling courses even as they work, just like Singapore's Skills Future Credit System.
$44 trillion, over half the world's total GDP, is potentially at risk as a result of the dependence of business on nature and its services. A key question that most governments grapple with is whether there is an opportunity for them to build back better, where efforts are placed to maximize the shared benefits to the economy, environment, and society, or whether a country would need to choose between the economy and environment. Our belief at AlphaBeta is that there does not have to be a trade-off between economic and environmental objectives. Our recent work with the World Economic Forum identified 15 systemic transitions with business opportunities worth $10 trillion that could also potentially create up to 395 million jobs by 2030. Making it happen will require policymakers, academics, scientists, and business leaders to work together. In particular, we will need to rethink our financial systems. $2.7 trillion per year up until 2030 would be required to scale these transitions. Businesses will also have to do a lot more to address this gap. For example, 242 of the 500 companies most exposed to deforestation risk have not yet made a public commitment to end deforestation. However, the good news is that companies are rethinking their approach. They're realizing that nature and business can flourish together.
Measures worth trillions of US dollars have been announced by countries all around the world, and of these, almost 420 billion have been announced in Southeast Asia alone. This is a massive fiscal stimulus which will have an impact on countries' fiscal sustainability. So how can countries rebuild their tax base without hampering the recovery? In a project we recently completed for the Asian Development Bank, we identified 3 areas. Number 1, expanding the tax base. Number 2, maximizing tax compliance. And number 3, simplifying tax compliance processes. In most emerging economies, there is an opportunity to make personal income tax more progressive. There are major gaps in the coverage of certain taxes, such as property taxation, taxation of wealth, and the taxation of environmental externalities. Secondly, tax compliance could really be transformed through digital technologies. For example, VAT fraud is one area that countries really struggle with around the world, and one area where they introduce interventions to really bring in new solutions. Lastly, there are also ways of simplifying taxpayers' lives by allowing online filing, enabling different payment methods, and having better communication with taxpayers, for example, through social media. This is an exciting area which is ripe with innovation and which is really top of mind for a lot of our clients, both in the public sector and the private sector.